Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the day 2 of the 2015 EAC Data Summit. And, I think we had a very good day yesterday, and we're going to have a great day again today. This morning, I'd like to welcome Doug Chapin to start our day off. He is the program director, director of the Election Academy at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. And he's going to get us started by kind of looking outside our world and how we can collect and use data. So welcome, Doug Chapin. We look forward to hearing your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm mic'd up. Good morning, everyone. My name is Doug, and I am an election geek. Now, wait a minute. It might be. I know it's early, but usually at the Election Geek Anonymous meetings, we say, "Hi, Doug." So let's try that again. Good morning. My name is Doug, and I'm an election geek.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, everybody. What a nice audience. Thank you for coming today. First of all, I do want to thank the Election Assistance Commission, the commissioners, and all the staff, not only for inviting me, but for hosting this data summit. There are a few things that get me more excited in the world of elections than good data and using it properly. And so it's a great opportunity to be here. And as I often say, and many of you have probably heard me say, other than family and friends, my favorite people in the world to be with are election officials. So it really is a pleasure to be with you here early on a Thursday morning. And if you're out there in webcast land, especially if you're out there on the West Coast, thank you for getting up early to be with us here today. What I want to talk about today as we kick off day 2 of the Elections Summit is going beyond the importance of data and the importance of analysis and thinking a little more deeply about how we can use what we want to do with data to structure how we collect and analyze it. And so I want to start with a phrase which is very popular with the local football team, and that is this: know your why. Why are we collecting data? Why are we collecting election data in the field of elections? And what does that tell us about what we can do with it? I think we collect data for 3 reasons. Data tells stories. Data gives us the ability to flesh out what we see with our eyes and understand more. Data reveals truths. Data helps us go beyond what's right in front of us to see the forest and not just the tree that's about to fall on us. But third, and I think most importantly, data needs language. Not just the language of stories and explanation, but also its own language, its own syntax, its own structure, which allows us to constrain it in such a way that we can tell the stories and reveal the truths that we want to tell and reveal. And to illustrate how that can work when it's done well, I want to reference another field which, like the field of elections, is passionately of interest to millions of Americans, but inexplicably and even shamefully seems to be ignored by the rest. And of course, I'm talking about Major League Baseball. Now, I want to talk about Major League Baseball partly because after family, friends, and election officials and data, baseball is really one of my favorite things. But I also want to talk about it today because I think baseball, and Major League Baseball in particular, has done a tremendous job in recent years in going beyond the way they've always done it, to think ahead and, if possible, in a game that's over 150 years old, truly revolutionize the way in which they collect and use data. And to illustrate that, I want to talk about a couple scenarios in a talk that I like to call a tale of 2 pitches. The first pitch involves this man, Max Scherzer of the Washington Nationals. On June 20th of this year, Max Scherzer was 1 out away from what's known as a perfect game. And for those of you who are not baseball fans, a perfect game is when a pitcher faces the minimum 27 batters and retires every single one of them, allowing none of them to reach first base. It's extraordinarily rare, maybe 24 times at most in the 150-plus years of Major League Baseball. That day, Scherzer was 1 out away. And the 27th batter was a man named Jose Tabata of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Tabata strode to the plate, and very quickly, Scherzer, like he had with just about everybody else that day, got to 2 strikes on Tabata. The entire crowd, me included, are on their feet roaring at the prospect of seeing something extraordinary and rare. Scherzer winds up, throws Tabata a hard-breaking ball known in the business as a slider, and this happens. The ball hits Tabata on his elbow. Tabata is awarded first base. The perfect game is gone. Now, it's not a truly sad story because Scherzer retired the next batter, which meant he got a no-hitter, which is still very special, but not quite as extraordinary and rare as a perfect game. And after the game, there was tremendous controversy about whether Tabata had done enough to get out of the way of the pitch. Not surprisingly, that discussion was colored in large part by the color of your favorite team's uniform. If you were a Pirates fan, you shrugged and said, hey, it's part of the game. Scherzer should have thrown him a strike. If you were a Nats fan or a neutral looking for something really rare, you thought that maybe Tabata had done a little bit less than he could have to get out of the way, and maybe he shouldn't have been awarded first base. And in the old world, and by the old world I mean maybe 7 years ago, before the iPhone 3 or whatever, the old days as my kids call it, all we would have had was that kind of talk radio debate back and forth. But we don't anymore because of this. This is called PitchFX. It was developed by a company called Sport Vision. And that picture up in the upper right-hand corner is of 3 cameras, which are in every Major League Baseball stadium across the country. And those 3 cameras capture about 24 pieces of data for every single pitch thrown in a Major League Baseball game. Speed, break, where it was released, where it ended up, position at the plate, and what have you. And that's resulted in a huge database of pitches for collection and analysis. And if you look at that data, something striking jumps out at you about the Scherzer hit by pitch. In the history of PitchFX's use, they recorded more than 5 million pitches. Of those, 283 were like Scherzer's, thrown by a right-handed pitcher to a right-handed batter with a hard break to 1 square inch just off the plate. How many of those hit a batter? 1. The one that hit Jose Tabata.
Wait, are you a Nats fan or a Pirates fan?
I'm a Nats fan. You bet it. Now, while this doesn't conclusively determine whether or not Jose Tabata is the massive world-class spoil sport that many of us think that he is, it certainly informs the discussion in a way that it never had before. In other words, Major League Baseball's effort to collect and categorize and make available for analysis pitch-by-pitch data, not just who threw it, but how fast it went, its location, what have you, tells us more about an event than we would have seen otherwise. Data tells stories. Now, my next point involves an old joke that's told about baseball umpires. And in it, 3 umpires are discussing their craft. And one of them says, I call him as I see him. And the other one pushes his glasses up to his nose and says, no, I call them as they are. The oldest one kind of harumphs, spits his tobacco and says, boys, they ain't nothing until we call them. And in baseball, for the longest time, the umpire's word was the last word. If he called it a strike, it was a strike. If he said you were out, it was out. In the new world of PitchFX, that isn't necessarily the case anymore. And in fact, PitchFX can help us reveal truths about the way in which Major League umpires call a baseball game. And so to that, I want to talk about another scenario involving this young man, Bryce Harper of the Washington Nationals. Harper is only 22 years old and already in his 4th year in the major leagues. And this year he is having truly a year for the ages, hitting at a clip that rivals the great Ted Williams at his age. And a big reason for his success, in addition to his speed and power, and awesome hair if he takes off the helmet, is his command of the strike zone. This year, more than ever before, Harper has learned to identify what pitch is a strike, what pitch is a ball, what pitch to hit, and what pitch to go by. And that power became very important on the night of July 31st of this year in New York, when my Washington Nationals were playing their then second-place rivals, the New York Mets. It's the bottom of the 11th inning in a tie game. Harper came up, and on a 2-2 pitch, he was thrown this pitch, circled in red. Now, if you look at this diagram, that black box is the strike zone. Harper, as a left-handed hitter, is standing to the right of the box. That pitch, circled in red, is high enough to be a strike, but is somewhere between 6 to 8 inches outside the plate. Now, that is a rule book ball, but is known in the business often as a lefty strike, and it is often called by umpires. Harper got that pitch, thought it was a ball, began to relax. The home plate umpire called it strike 3. He was out. Immediately, Harper and the umpire had a very frank and open exchange of views, after which young Mr. Harper was asked to leave the field. Now, here's something interesting about that pitch and that strike. Using PitchFX data, some enterprising analysts out there, not just motivated by the Harper call, but by others, looked at lefty strike data. These are all the major league umpires, about 100 of them in the game. And what this analyst did is use that PitchFX data and figure out what percentage of lefty strikes, those pitches off the plate that are still called strikes, were called by various umpires. And you'll see by the boxes I've circled that the range is from about 4%, 1 in 25, to 30%, or almost 1 in 3. What's fascinating, though, is that when you take that data and overlay it against other characteristics, you find out that, by and large, the folks to the left-hand side of the spectrum tend to be younger umpires, who presumably are looking at the PitchFX data and calibrating their strike zones accordingly. The ones who do not tend to be umpires who are more experienced. Remember, they ain't nothing until I call them. Unfortunately for Bryce, the umpire that night was Jerry Meals, who was one of the more experienced umpires in the game. Data reveals truths. All right? You can take a single pitch, again, colored by your own fandom, or you can look at the data and start to identify how different umpires are calling different pitches. And so it allows us to, instead of going from the forest, instead of going from the tree back to the forest, it enables us to go from the forest down to the tree and figure out where this individual umpire fits in the overall scheme of things. How does this relate to elections? I think it relates to elections in a couple of different ways. Number one, the 3,000 plus election officials we have in this country are in some ways like our umpires. Each one of them comes to the game, the field, the work with a different point of view, a different approach, different biases, strengths, and weaknesses. But unlike baseball, where we have this, PitchFX, we have tools that look more like this, the Election Assistance Commission's EVES tool. Now, this is light years better than what we used to have, which was nothing, right? And it's certainly better than paper and pencil. But unlike Major League Baseball, whose PitchFX gives us observational data, which allows us to record what happened, not necessarily what we see, we're asking states and localities to report their own numbers. And unfortunately, that means we often end up with data that looks like this. These are 3 pages from the 2014 report that involve 18 jurisdictions, sort of lengthier explanations of how many applications did you receive. Put this back into the baseball context, this is a little bit like an umpire saying, well, yeah, maybe it was a strike, but where I'm from, if I have a steak the night before, my eyes are a little bit better, and I don't like Harper because he's young, and he needs to get a haircut or what have you. But you end up with this very sort of imprecise look at data. I think what we need in the field, and what I hope we will begin to talk about today and continue to work on going forward, is a system that finds a way to capture the same kind of real-time observational data, whether you're using technology or the line length monitors that my colleague Charles Stewart, everybody drink, talks about, or the other innovative things that you all are doing. We need to make that routinized rather than something that just the high performers are doing. We need to find a way to put real-time, constant scrutiny on the process so that we can do maybe not 5 million pitch level analysis, but we can still do very detailed, fine-grained analysis of not only what's going wrong, because that's what everybody always wants to talk about, but also what's going right so that the rest of us can copy it. So I hope you'll forgive, and I hope you appreciated the walk through the world of baseball and what it might mean for elections. But again, as we think today and going forward about data, remember, data tells stories. Data reveals truths. But without a language, without an approach, without a commitment to real-time, constant collection and analysis of data, all data can tell us is this. I'm looking forward to working with all of you and with people at every level of experience, including entry-level election officials, to adopt that constant, passionate commitment to data. I look forward to working with all of you. If you've got questions, suggestions, or anything else about the way you would like the work to go forward, please don't hesitate to contact me at dchapin@umn.edu. Thank you for getting up early with me this morning. Thank you for indulging my love of baseball. And play ball. Thank you.